Thank you, everybody, for your patience, and thank you to Toby for filling in. I'm still really happy to be in Rome. The title of my talk is Cherishing the Negated and Exploited, Reevaluating Cross-Cultural Heritage in Fashion. Last year in Arnhem, probably a lot of you were there, we searched for the new luxury in the interests of sustainability. Our challenge was to find something environmentally friendly, local, meaningful, something that you would hold on to and not throw away. We searched inside the domain that the word fashion demarcates. This is a problematic starting point because the word fashion customarily denotes oppositional exclusivity, not a human universal. There is the world of fashion and the world that falls outside fashion, concentric circles. The word itself, fashion, suggests universality, a way of doing among many ways of doing. So, façon, facere. The Western way of doing has claimed precedence. The word fashion has been fallaciously co-opted by the West. In fact, it is no more unique and different than clothing systems in other cultures, but it presents itself as a special case, and that delusion has literally been promoted vigorously and bought into and reified by the economics of fashion. Last year, too, during the search for the new luxury, the non-fashion domain emerged in the discussion exclusively as an appendage to Western fashion, as a provider of exotic fabrics and designs, and also labor, but not on its own terms. I argue as a member of the RCDF, the Research Collective for Decolonizing Fashion, the same group that Toby belongs to, that sustainable fashion must needs be decolonial fashion. That our task to cure fashion's ills is to do away with the dualistic model of fashion that upholds an illusory Western superiority. Decolonizing fashion is a tall order that challenges all of us. It demands that we eliminate the hierarchies and exploitative relationships that are the foundation of the current fashion system. The RCDF maintains that fashion is found in all cultures, and each fashion system is unique world heritage. Fashion is universal because dressing and bodily adornment are universal human cultural traits. I thought it was really wonderful this morning that we had a very positive response in this room to the words said by Mrs. Alberta St. John James, that we need to recognize heritages outside the West. I think the time for this idea has come. This session is about alternative fashions, and Toby has already talked about an alternative fashion in Japan, something that has been slowly being accepted as fashion in Japan. And later, when I'm becoming Angela Janssen, then I'll be talking about fashion in Morocco. So the three of us are sort of forming a block for the RCDF. I'm an anthropologist. I took this photograph a year ago when I invited people in a village in North Sumatra in Indonesia to dress up in their traditional clothing for a photo shoot. I've been working in that village to revive the headcloth that they're wearing. It's called a bulang. Weavers have stopped making it because the current market made it possible for them to continue. They cannot compete with mechanized production. I think the same story we just heard for Poland, that as soon as the cheap production came in from the West, that was the end of the local clothing system. The headcloth design, the process of making it, and the way it is worn all add up to a depiction of their traditional intellectual universe, the principles of their culture. The fibers and dyes are sustainable. But these are modern people who usually dress in Western clothing. For the occasion of the photo shoot, they adore dressing up in their traditional garments, but their clothing tradition is all but completely extinct. The process of erosion of indigenous culture and fashion is happening everywhere in the world. Clothing traditions are disappearing like language and cultural traditions, like plant and animal species, like forests. Their social, physical, and cultural habitat is being eroded. This is directly the effect of the global dominance of the Western fashion system. Cheap synthetic fibers, cheap throwaway clothes produced for ephemeral exogenous trends. More powerful and insidious, however, is the promulgation of Western ways of being and thinking, including gender and racial hierarchies and stimuli to exploit humans and nature. This is what the Western fashion system does. In the area where this headcloth is no longer made, except by the one weaver that I've encouraged to do it, there's the problem of poverty. Today, we talked earlier, we had that whole session with leaders of industry who were talking about the importance of heritage, the importance of that root, so that the rest of the plant that grows above it continually feeds on that original root. That root has to be there for the system to continue, and that root is disappearing in Indonesia. An example from this bulang, the cloth is used by the Simalungun to create, solidify, and memorize and promote relations between people. And when the cloth is commodified, it's something that becomes alienable instead of something that stays and promotes relations between groups. For instance, this cloth is received by a woman when she marries. It's given to her by her family of origin. She wears it. She actually stores it. She can have many of this kind, but that one given to her by her parents, her family of origin, is kept and stored carefully. When she dies, her son brings it to her family of origin and says, she has died. They know what it means when he brings a cloth to them, because it's her cloth, it represents her. They take the cloth back, they're sad. And then when the funeral takes place, they go back to her family of marriage and they say, we are giving you this cloth back. It's for the wife of her son, because we want the relations between our two families to last forever. And when she dies, it will continue to remain in that lineage. In other words, this cloth is about inalienable relationships that don't end, and that theme of continuity is found in the weaving and so on. Sustainable alternatives do not only have to be sought, they have to be found through being recognized. The new luxury has always been with us in the form of the traditions that we regard as being outside the purview and lens of fashion. Traditions that our fashion system is eliminating and from which we can learn about fashion alternatives. Last year we sought so hard for fashion alternatives. Those alternatives will inevitably be cultural, not just physical. Our vision and wisdom have been blocked by the Western ego, reified by the global economic system. That ego needs to be pricked and the arrogance recognized. Only then, I could say, will the scales fall from our eyes and will the West acknowledge the uniqueness and importance of all the world's clothing systems. As Walter Mignolo says, the problem is not that the West sees itself as superior, every culture does that, but that it has succeeded in promoting its system as superior throughout the world, and it's been bought into. What will decolonized fashion look like? I encourage the fashion colloquium. There's Ian, we had a talk about this earlier. I know he agrees with us. I encourage the fashion colloquium to take this theme, decolonializing fashion, as a theme for a future conference. How will a fair and culturally inclusive fashion operate? That will take some brainstorming. Inclusiveness will be found in recognition in the fashion discourse, that multiple fashions exist through time and space, that all of them are changing at their own rate, that diverse systemic principles are driving their distinctive change. And that's through economics, aesthetics, social, spiritual, and so on background. And also, it's not just a new discourse, but a new ethics and a new praxis. Recognition that fashions are about heritage, humanity, and community. The development of alternatives to design appropriation. We had earlier somebody who goes scouting around the world for inspiration to bring it back to Italy. I'm going to ask the Italian fashion system to do the opposite, to go and protect those indigenous traditions. It's also about giving living wages that will allow the encouragement of diversity. Knowing rather than plundering other fashion heritages is transformative. And so the challenge that I would like to issue, especially to fashion business, turn fashion relations on their head. Adopt alternative fashion systems. Do not use them as source material, but rather protect them from the erosive effects of Western fashion. In the same way that fashion companies today, there's a few of them, are taking it upon themselves to protect tracts of nature. Develop programs of cultural mutualism. We had earlier, when we started the afternoon, that Sarah Maino said, the new generation has to be supported. Support from corporations for students was also mentioned this morning. The need for heritage knowledge was mentioned. All of these things are necessary in all the cultures around the world to perpetuate their fashion traditions which are being eroded. We need to recognize what an alternative indigenous fashion system has to offer conceptually to us in the West, not just in material financial sense. Support that other system in a way that protects it on its own terms and does not exploit it for financial gain. Recognize the global gains that can be made from understanding alternative ways of having fashion. Let's make this a subject of conversation. Let's do this. Surely we can embrace other fashion heritages in a constructive and respectful way. This is heritage preservation for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.